Hello, nonprofit leaders. Welcome to your final video in this series, which covers your board members. Engaging your board to collaborate as a team with you for various purposes can be a bit complex. In my online course, Building Teams to Build Funds, which you can find on my website, I do delve into the board's legal obligations, how those are expressed in roles and responsibilities, how to build a constructive partnership between leadership, staff, and board, how to move the board into embracing their fundraising role, and how to develop and implement a major gift campaign with your board. For our purposes, though, we will address a few key points. Research by BoardSource and others informs us that board members are often not provided clear expectations during either recruitment or orientation. In fact, some receive no orientation. And very few board members ask the question, what laws am I bound to comply with as a nonprofit board member? The American Law Institute said, volunteer nonprofit boards are often much less knowledgeable about their responsibilities than their paid, for-profit counterparts. Why does this even matter? Good governance requires knowledge of the laws by which you must operate. You can't drive a car without knowing the rules of the road, right? The same is true for running a nonprofit, which is one of the most complex legal entities that exists. The most effective boards understand their legal obligations and how those are expressed in roles and responsibilities. I have a handout that I've put together called Board Roles and Responsibilities that you can use in your board manual to give new board, both recruits and members. And you can get that by emailing me at nancy@poweryourmission.com. But do make sure you tell me what you are requesting because I get a lot of emails, obviously. Now remember, these roles and responsibilities are best practices that have evolved from the legal obligations. In my course, Building Teams to Build Funds, we do dig into the state and federal laws that evolved over thousands of years. In fact, back to the days of Plato, through the Middle Ages and so on. It actually was a hoot going through this in my course. But if your board doesn't have this knowledge, how do they get it? Is leadership staff in the awkward and frustrating position to have to make their board aware of their roles and responsibilities? They are supposed to receive this information during orientation, but what happens if they didn't? You may need to introduce this to them. Can you do that? It depends on the nature of the relationship between leadership staff and the board. In my course, Building Teams to Build Funds, I have included 2 lessons on the relationship between leadership staff and the board. I'm going to summarize those 2 lessons as best as I can here. You need to have what BoardSource calls a constructive partnership between the board and leadership staff. I have developed a 3-step process for developing a constructive partnership. Step 1 is to understand roles and responsibilities of board and leadership staff. In lesson 1 of my online course, I address the board's legal obligations and how those are expressed in these roles and responsibilities, who does what in terms of governance versus management, and where roles shift and overlap. How all of that is navigated depends upon the nature of the relationship between board and staff. In lesson 2, I provide the tools you need to meet step 2 and step 3. You'll be provided communication guidelines and strategies to strengthen the relationship. Obviously, I can't do all of that in a 10-minute video, so you can learn more about this process if you set up a free discovery call on my website, and there is a link on the left-hand side of your screen. And if you book a free discovery call, I can even do an assessment of the nature of your relationship between leadership staff and the board during that discovery call. Conflict and tension can occur when it is unclear who does what, so knowing who does what must come first. However, I want to stress that it is important to understand that effective organizations will move far beyond who does what and will have developed the social capital that adds value to their nonprofit. In 2005, a study was conducted and reported on in the Journal for Nonprofit Management in 2008. The article is called "The Board Chair Executive Director Relationship: Dynamics that Create Value for Nonprofit Organizations." The study used social capital theory to explore whether and how the board chair executive director relationship added value to nonprofit organizations. So what did that study find? The study found that there are three patterns of work that board chair and executive directors do together. They call these folks pairs. And the first pair was a managing pair. They only manage together, such as on internal finances, personnel, facilities, developing board agendas, recruiting new board members, that kind of thing. The other pairs were called planning pairs, and they were engaged in determining direction and strategy, building relationships, working in committees. And then they found leading pairs who worked with engaged boards on mission-related and strategic work and who described a web of board, staff, and community relationships. They were able to create a level of engagement between their boards and the community not evident in the other pairs. So what made these pairs leading pairs? Trust. The board executive director study revealed that the strength of trust in the leading pairs was 67% higher than in the planning pairs and 133% higher than in the managing pairs. Only the leading pairs had achieved the highest level, called identification-based trust, where you identify with one another. The study found that the relationship between the board chair and executive director did impact the extent of effectiveness of the organization. So how do you become a leading pair? The communication strategies I introduce in my course pave the path to building trust, which is essential for becoming a leading pair. Set up a discovery call and let me assess that relationship between your leadership staff and the board and whether your organization is ready to learn how to become a leading pair, how to build a constructive relationship. Again, here's where you find that course. The link is on the left-hand side of your screen. Don't forget to invite your board to participate in that circle activity you learned in video 3. Once you've done it a time or two with your staff, invite the board in to participate in that activity because it will serve to strengthen the relationship between the board, staff, and volunteers. And now that you've begun the journey to build your teams, we can move into the areas of your nonprofit to use those teams. So in our next video series, we will explore resource development. I might actually decide to turn that into a webinar. Either way, it's probably at least 4 to 6 weeks away, and I will provide notice to you of that on this Facebook page. Thank you for joining me, and good luck in the great work that you do. See you again.